fishing, it's in my soul.
Welcome to the Salt Strong Podcast, disrupting fishing entertainment as you know it. Prepare to laugh. Prepare to get to know fishing legends in a whole new and unfiltered way. And on occasion, you might even learn a thing or two about fishing. Here's your host, Joe Simons. Like diamonds.
The state of the Saltwater Fishing Union. Hey everybody, Joe Simons, Like Diamonds, back again. I had quite a few people have reached out and said, Joe, what happened to your normal January State of the Union address? And I realized, holy smokes, we're almost here in April and I haven't done one yet. So I apologize. If you don't know, we do a State of the Fishing Union address every year. We've been doing it since 2019, and we talk about tackle, where tackle's going, and new innovations, and pros and cons, things that we're seeing go away, things that are happening, what we foresee going on in the future. Obviously, last year there was a ton of talk about just supply chain issues, and that's still there. I'll tell you in a little bit what's happening, and then we talk about conservation and access, and just kind of overall community, and is fishing growing or is it shrinking, et cetera. So those are kind of the three levels. So kind of tackle, conservation, and water access, which is actually kind of a frightening thing that we'll talk about here in a little bit. And then overall just fishing and in communities, and is it growing? Are more kids out fishing, et cetera. So I will preface this by saying these are all my personal opinions. Is the CEO of Salt Strong. We have 36,000 members, so we have a lot of data that we have coming in ourselves, and have a lot of feedback, a pretty just constant feedback loop from anglers, and we have a lot of captains and guides in that group. Obviously, we're talking to manufacturers constantly. We manufacture our own stuff, so we're talking to the people who are creating the supplies and the raw materials for manufacturing. We've obviously got a lot of different marina owners and charter captains, and even some commercial fishermen that we chat with. We've got FWC and even Texas Parks and Wildlife that we have connections with. So this is really just me sharing all of the input I'm getting from all these different groups and organizations and people, and giving you my honest opinion of what I believe is to happen and what we're going to foresee over the next year. So let's start with tackle. First and foremost, the tackle, the whole tackle thing has completely changed. And here's what I'm talking about. I'll give you a story. So about 18 months ago, if you recall, it was really, really hard to get fishing reels, especially particular spinning reels from companies like Daiwa and Shimano and Penn. And I still remember the day we got, I believe it was essentially a pallet of Daiwa Fuegos. At the time, Bass Pro did not have Fuegos. Academy did not have Fuegos. Dick's did not have Fuegos. Amazon had no Fuegos. We are, and still to this day, are one of the bigger sellers of Daiwa spinning reels. We personally love them. We've tested all the different brands out ourselves. We believe in Daiwa. Their customer service is top notch. And we stand behind them as a brand. We're not sponsored by them. We don't get paid by them. We pay the same amount, just like any other tackle store does, to get their inventory. But one of our favorites. All that being said, we got this pallet in, and so we were one of the first people to get it. We were smart enough to put orders in once we started seeing what was happening with the supply chain. So, Daiwa is nice, and they do what's right. It's, hey, you guys ordered this thing first, and you paid for it. Here you go. And so we get a whole pallet of these reels, and normally a pallet like this would last us, I don't know, a couple of months, right? Maybe 3 months, right? And this is a lot of this is about $70,000-$80,000 worth of reels. So we get the reels, we check them into inventory, we put them on the store, and then we send one email about the fact that we have Daiwa Fuegos. One email. And we sold out. We sold like $80,000 of reels in like 24, 48 hours. It was definitely less than 3 days. And it was just like, this is surreal. Good news, yeah, cool. We just had $80,000 come in a couple days. Bad news is Daiwa don't have any more reels. Like they still got to fulfill Bass Pro and Academy and every other tackle store out there. And so now they're like, yeah, well, that's congratulations, guys. Now you can't get any more for months. And so I tell you that story to let you know kind of what we were seeing on our end. And there was people just like the toilet paper fiasco that were buying multiple. We'd see people buy 4 Fuegos just because you couldn't get them anywhere else. Like, oh man, what if I can never get them again? And, no one was buying hundreds, but, you'd have people that were, normally would buy 1 and they were buying 2. And the whole thing was just nuts. It was honestly madness. And we all realized it couldn't go on like that forever, but it went on for so long. And so what would happen on our end is we would have to put really big orders in because we knew all these companies, and this is has nothing to do with Daiwa. This is every company that we're buying from. We would have to put really big orders in because they were getting the point. They had so many orders and they knew they couldn't fulfill them all. And so they would just do partial fulfillment to make sure that they could spread out the love, right? So let's just say they had 500,000 orders of a specific SKU, let's just say of a specific item, and they only had 10,000 to give out. They're not going to just give all 10,000 to the first person like a Bass Pro Shops and let everyone else have nothing. They were going to give everyone a little bit to at least just start getting some inventory into these, into their distributors' hands. The distributors wouldn't go crazy. And so what was happening is we started realizing that everyone did, like, oh man, I'm only getting partial of what I order, so let me just order bigger so it'll get a bigger slice of the pie. And so that didn't end well because then you had people putting these massive orders in, and all of a sudden it slowly started catching up, and these companies were coming back, the manufacturers saying, well, hey, you put in these huge orders, so we've been trying to ramp up supply so that we could, help kind of solve this whole demand issue. And there's, now some of these manufacturers as it's starting to catch up, are sitting there with a lot of inventory saying, all right, what the heck are we going to do with it? And so the good news, if you're following me so far on the tackle side of things, is it's getting back to a normal level. The other thing for the consumer, even though with reels particularly, you don't really ever see those discounted, but with other items, you might see a sale here and there at some of the big box stores, et cetera. For 2 years during this whole COVID supply chain issue, no one had to give any discounts on any kind of tackle. Same with boats, right? And if you've bought a car or a truck over the last couple of years, the dealerships, like, they don't even know what the word discount is. That was the name of the game, right? All these dealers, they'd have, we're going to have a spring discount and it's President's Day discount. And they were always doing sales to get the inventory moving. Really, for the last couple of years, that went away. They didn't have to because they had more demand than they had supply. They had more people waving money in the air saying, I want to buy this, but they just couldn't even get it. So that is slowly shifting. And if you've looked around your local Chevy or Ford dealership or Dodge dealership, they're starting to look like they did pre-COVID. I don't think they're there yet, but it's slowly starting to happen. This whole used and new car, I would say it was almost like the tulip craze. I mean, it was wild. I mean, people were buying new cars and then selling them for 5,000 to 10,000 more than they just paid for them after they'd driven around for a month. Like that's not normal. Usually cars depreciate the second you drive them off the lot. They don't appreciate. And so the whole thing was just whack. Same with boats. You guys have seen it. It's wild, the price that some of these boats were going for. And same deal. People were buying brand new boats. They'd waited in line a year sometimes to get a boat. Man, these aren't like some special custom boat. These are just normal boats. They wait a year to get a boat or longer. And then you drive it around for a while, put, 100 hours or so on it, and then sell it for more than they paid for it. It was completely out of whack. All that is coming back to a little bit more normal phase. It's not there yet, but it is certainly coming back to normal. Now, for some tackle, I would say more on the retail side, not the manufacturers, but retailers like the moms and pops, a lot of them did a very poor job of not predicting that this wouldn't last forever, meaning they went way too heavy on inventory. And I'm already starting to see it. I'm on a couple of different lists when things like tackle stores and even little small marinas go for sale, I get notified from brokers because I'm not sitting there trying to buy stuff left and right because we haven't, but I'm always interested, intrigued, and just kind of want to have a pulse on it. I just want as much information as possible because you can start predicting the future a little bit better when you have, real-time data. It's all about having data. And I've seen over the last few months, there's been an increase of tackle companies and even just kind of no, I'm sorry, not tackle companies, tackle stores and little small mom and pop manufacturers going up for sale. And I've dug into a couple of them because a couple of them really intrigued me. And it seems like the theme is that most of them are in trouble. And it's because they went way too heavy on inventory, thinking that, like that story I told you about selling $80,000 of reels in 48 hours with one email without even any other marketing. A lot of them just thought, hey, this is going to continue forever. And so they kept buying like that. And all of a sudden it didn't come to a screeching halt. It still hasn't yet as I'm recording this, but it's certainly changed significantly from what it was a year and 2 years ago. And so now, especially if you don't have like a big email list like we do and have a big audience, if you're just waiting on someone to come in your front door, and it used to be 50 people would come in and on a Saturday and buy reels, and now it's 2 to 3, and you're sitting on more than ever. That really stresses out in terms of cash flow. It stresses out a lot of small businesses, and a lot of them are starting to sell to try to get out as soon as they can. There's going to be some consolidation that you're going to see. And I do believe you will see, unless something just drastically changes, what I don't see it happening this year. I do think you'll see some of these smaller tackle stores and even some of the smaller manufacturers getting bought up and or maybe even going out of business completely. I think you're going to see maybe for the first time the ability to buy a boat at a somewhat discount. I don't think it's going to ever be like where they're just cutting them down by 30%, but you will be able to start having a little bit of negotiating power as a buyer. And I think that's good for just overall consumers. I think the cost of just boats and fishing in general went up so high, it was almost pricing a lot of people out of the market that maybe had dreamed of having a boat. And even the cost of like the Freedom Boat Clubs. I mean, all that stuff just went sky high because they were having to charge more because guess what? They don't get their boats for free. They still got to go buy them. Everything, part of it was inflation, part of it was the supply and demand. It was just this perfect storm of all of it coming together. And so I think you're going to see a massive, massive, massive change in tackle. The bad news is when you have a slowdown like this and there's not as much just money coming in to the tackle industry in general, it also cuts down on innovation. And that's the bad side of it for consumers is you don't see as much innovation and there isn't as much R&D and as much testing and just new ideas and people spending money to develop new molds and new ways to catch fish when there's not as much money coming in. And I've been to ICAST now for many years, and it's been wild to see the swings that have occurred, depending on just how the market's doing in general. But the great news is because of COVID, it brought so many new anglers into this fishing ecosystem, saltwater and freshwater. And really hitting all-time records of people, having a fishing license in America. We now, as anglers and people who just love this sport, we've got to do a good job of keeping those, quite a few million people that really came into fishing for the first time, to keep them interested, to keep them coming back, that it can't just be a one and done type of thing if we want this sport to grow, which we do. I know there are some people that have a very limited view and think, oh gosh, yeah, if we have more people fishing, then there won't be any fish. And we're going to talk about that in a second. But here's the truth. You need a lot of fishermen to make things happen, right? When you have voters, it helps get things done from policymakers. No one's going to take anyone serious if you only have 4,000 people in America who fish. When you have 50 million, that gets the attention of lawmakers and the people who are deciding if there's going to be access or if they're deciding if we're going to care about what happens to the water quality. So think of it that way. There's plenty of fish out there. Yes, there's been some devastating issues that have decreased the amount of fish in certain areas. And yes, there are certain areas that have been overfished. Very rarely, if ever, is it because of recreational anglers, which we'll talk about here in just one second. Normally, it is because of the commercial anglers and some of these massive trawlers. And it's a pretty big, if you look at it, commercial fishing industry. It's very few of them compared to recreational, but the amount of actually fish that they kill and harvest, and even the bycatch, the stuff that you're just killing in the process of getting their fish before they sell it to the markets, et cetera. I mean, it doesn't even compare to recreational. The bad news is the recreational anglers, the hook and line anglers, if you will, seem to get a lot of flack just because there's so many of us. But don't ever forget this. This is so important, and it's critical to really the future of fishing. You have to have the big numbers to get anything done. And those numbers, every time someone buys a license, that goes to help pay for public ramps. That basically pays for access. It pays for security. I mean, it pays for the security of the future of our fishing. Every time that someone is buying licenses, spending money on tackle and this excise tax, all of this goes to help grow and give more power to the entire industry. You do not want to see the fishing industry as a whole shrinking. Maybe there might be more fish out there. The truth is, if you don't have as many recreational anglers fighting against the commercial, they'll end up just taking it over and killing more fish. And all of a sudden, now we're back to hardly any anglers, hardly any access, and hardly any fish. That doesn't really work for anyone. And I think that's what a lot of people tend to miss. And I've been able to see this by looking at this thing from a really, really big perspective and being a part of all of it, from being on the recreational side to talking with charter captains and the commercial guys and the FWCs. I mean, it's really, really, really intriguing. So let's talk about conservation and water access. So I believe this is going to be the hottest topic, not just this year, but for many, many years to come. And you've got great groups like Captains for Clean Water, and here locally, Tampa Bay Waterkeepers. There's waterkeeper groups like that really all over the country now, I believe. And the water, and this is not a new thing. This has really been going on for decades. Water is going to be the key. If you don't have clean water where fish can not just survive, but thrive and reproduce and have real living ecosystems, and actually areas with seagrass and oysters, and here in Florida, mangroves, we're not going to have much of a fishery. And there will be a lot of people who just drop out, and then all of a sudden access will be pulled, and it's kind of a negative spiral. And we do not want that to happen for many obvious reasons. And reading the book of called The Bass Boss, it was how Ray Scott, started BASS. They were faced with the same thing, and this would have been back in the 70s. They realized back then there weren't that many rules on dumping, literally like toxic chemicals into lakes and dumping batteries into lakes. I mean, even our own Coast Guard, this is no lie, you can Google it. I mean, Ray Scott and BASS sued the U.S. Coast Guard for dumping tons and tons of massive batteries into Lake Gunnersville, I believe it was. Stuff like that. It's just, I hate to say we didn't know any better, just like, smoking in airplanes. But it just kind of didn't know any better because no one had seen usually the effects, like the stuff that we're seeing today. It didn't happen last week, right? There are cases when there's spills and like Piney Point, but for the most part, what we're seeing today with the seagrass loss and just fewer fish in areas that they used to be fish, and even just lush habitats. This is not something that just happened over the last 5 or 6 or 12 months. This is stuff that's been going on for a long time. This is stuff that happened many, many years ago and is now just continuing. It's like the compound effect. It's just been slowly compounding. The same as if you dump If you throw a battery, if you live on a lake and throw a big battery in there, you won't see any change. If you did it every day for a year, you still might not see much of a change. But at some point, if you do that every single day for a year, 2, 3 years, you're going to wake up and the lake's going to be completely dead. If you throw any kind of, chemical or some kind of toxic thing into any body of water, if you do that enough, it will destroy that body of water. Yes, nature does heal itself. Yes, nature is incredibly powerful. Yes, there have been instances where it does come back on itself, but that is very, very rare. Normally, it takes a group of people or groups of people or whole cities or states or countries to get involved to slow the process of whatever is hurting that body of water down so that it can have time to heal. You still have to give it time to heal. And I do believe conservation, and I'm going to put water up at the very top, is going to be one of the key things that we're going to have to attack. After that, it's going to be, I'm going to be careful with my words here, but it's going to be the politics that are involved with commercial fishing, meaning, and I'm not talking about just the guy throwing the cast net on a school of mullet. I'm talking about the massive, massive companies that have huge trawlers and they're going out with these huge, huge, huge nets, the ones that you've probably seen before that have all kinds of horrible bycatch. And I mean, they're just kind of killing machines. And yes, I realize there's a seafood market and it does support a lot of jobs, which is why it hasn't just gone away. It's also the reason they have lobbyists, whereas the recreational anglers, for the most part, don't have the same kind of power. Even though there's more of them, it's a bigger army. They don't really have the resources or even the time to attend all these meetings and to hire attorneys and lobbyists to keep things going. They don't have the money to pad some of the politicians' pockets. I mean, some of the stuff I've seen, like in North Carolina in particular, we did a whole podcast on it. It is appalling to see the types of people who are even on the boards who are making decisions for these fisheries. And it's like, how this doesn't even make any sense. Who in their right mind would vote for this? And then you dig in, like, oh, they're also on the board of this massive commercial fishery or blah, blah, blah. I'm not going to name names. We did a whole podcast on it. But it's there's some very dirty things going on behind the scenes. And I do believe this is going to have to be addressed. It's talked about a lot. Sometimes it goes away. Sometimes, the commercial people get their way. And I get it. No one wants, a hardworking, because the sad part is you got these big corporations that they're really part of the problem on this space. And they're the ones who have been literally caught, padding politicians' pockets and decision makers' pockets. And a lot of it is just following the money trail. But you have hardworking, just good old boys and good old girls doing their job on the lower end, right? The people who are actually out there working these boats and just doing their job. And no one wants to see people lose jobs over it. And I think that's why this conversation gets very heated. And even in the meetings that I've seen, you have a lot of these, legitimately just hardworking people just trying to get paid. They don't want to lose their jobs. It impacts their families. It impacts their kids. So it's a whole lot bigger than just saying, oh, let's pull the plug on all commercial fishing. It also is a big industry and it does support a lot of people. And I'm not taking any, like their side. I'm obviously on the recreational side because that's who I am. But I also have to put myself in their shoes and say, why is this happening? And so at some point we have to find a middle ground, some type of resolution. And the more recreational anglers we have, the more power we have to get some things our way, if you will. Once again, if we're both small in people and in money and resources, they're going to continue just to push all over us. And all of a sudden, there's going to be just only commercial fishing for all the nearshore and offshore species. And the recreational anglers will get nothing. Hey, go fish from shore, fish from up here. That's all you get. I'm being sarcastic, but that would be it in the absolute worst world. So I do believe that is going to be something we talk about continually. And this is not just in a specific state or area. This is all over the place. The whole Gulf of Mexico is dealing with this. It's happened in the Carolinas. It's happened all over Florida. It's happening all up the coast. It happens in New England. This is an ongoing thing. And speaking of the kind of the politicians, There was a thing there in Cape Cod, right, about dumping nuclear waste. There's been all kinds of things happening in Florida with old power plants. And this ties in with water and kind of the dirty politicians piece of it. And this is where we have to take a stand. We have to get not just angry, but we have to take action and somehow form groups. I know there's some small ones out there, but form bigger groups to really go after these massive corporations that are just using these things as a veil to just kind of get rid of them and like, oh yeah, it's not our fault. Let's clean our hands of it and let's pollute our waters for years, generations to come. It's just not fair. It's absolutely not fair, and something has to be done about that. And so much of it, if you go back in history, it was little deals that were cut under the table 15, 20 years ago. Maybe politicians that aren't even in office anymore, and they might have gotten a little cash or a pad in the back of the pocket, or who knows what deals were cut. But I don't know, that stuff just infuriates me. Because now we're having to pay for it later, and our kids will be paying for it if we don't do something about it. So I do think that's going to be something we talk about continuously. And then the access, let's talk about that. I get a lot of different emails, and I'm a lot of different email lists, and for both fishing and hunting. So I pay attention to both, because if it's happening in hunting, it usually kind of trickles over into fishing. And there's been a lot of land revoked, land access for hunters. It's now happening in fishing. It's happening over in California. There's been areas, obviously, in Florida, down in the Keys and the Bahamas that, have been cut off, that used to be areas that recreational anglers could go. There's been some areas that only commercial people can fish. There's been areas that are just shut off completely. There have been seasons that have been cut off completely. And so much of this goes back to what I said earlier about the power of having a growing industry, right? The American Sport Fishing Association, ASA. I mean, all the groups that are doing these studies, they want as many numbers as possible, so that when they do go up in front of the House or Senate, wherever they are, that they're able to say, hey, like, we're representing 60 million people that spend $15 billion or $100 billion or whatever the number might be in this industry. That gets people's attention. That is why we want this industry to grow. That is how, sadly, you get things done in America. It's either by people, voters, or money. As sad as that is really the number way to get things done. There are other ways, like being loud, but you can only do that so much. It certainly helps, and it certainly gets things moving quicker and gets the attention of the people making the rules to either revoke access or not, when you can have a lot of money and a lot of people behind it. Now, what I see that worries me, and there's just been talks about it, and some of this stuff, it gets passed like on a Friday, right? When half the politicians aren't even there to vote on it. Like, some of these things are so dirty, where they'll revoke access, or they'll take something away, or they'll put something in place that all of a sudden, can't be revoked, or if it can, it's going to take another 5 years just to get that one decision turned around. It is so frustrating. And all it takes is a group of politicians that do not like fishing and want, let's just say, an entire body of water revoked, or, hey, you can only use these ramps now 1 day a week. I mean, I'm not saying that is an actual rule by any means, but that's the kind of stuff that all of a sudden can happen if we sleep on this and just assume the politicians are going to take care of anglers. It is not the case. And there are people out there, and not just PETA, but there are other groups out there that would love to see fishing completely gone, that would love to see access to anglers revoked. That, hey, maybe just like hunting duck, you can only do it a couple months out of the year. Other than that, you guys can't go fishing anymore. There's discussions like that going on in places like California, where they want to just completely revoke massive areas of water for many, many months at a time, to let it, kind of grow back, if you will, where no recreational anglers can go. And that's the first people they pick on, because, once again, we don't have all the lobbyists and all the people up there just being a squeaky wheel like we should. So pay attention to this access stuff. And if you ever get emails or see things on Facebook or in our insider community about, sending a message to senator or whoever it might be about some type sort of access, perk up and get involved and find out more, because that is a really scary one. Because once access, either proximity access or time access, meaning, hey, you can't fish in this area anymore, or hey, you can't fish anywhere here during these certain times of the year. That stuff is really scary because it's really, really, really tough to get reversed. So please, please, please pay attention to that. All right, now let's move on to overall fishing. And I'm going to talk about local love and just communities in general. As you've probably guessed, just a theme of all this is coming together and uniting. A lot of it is going to be done through our local communities and even local fishing clubs. It's a big reason that we're now pushing into these Salt Strong local chapters to be able to bring communities together and talk about things like conservation and access, and to make sure that we're all just informed. A lot of it is just informing everyone about what's really going on behind the scenes. And hey, do you guys know they're about to vote on this next week? And this has a massive impact on us as anglers and the ability for our kids to have access to go fishing like we did. And so a lot of it's going to be coming together in small groups and then uniting into bigger groups to make things happen. The good news is, as I said, we're really at all-time highs for the amount of people actually fishing. There are a lot of new anglers. There are a lot of new young anglers. I am seeing, obviously, in the bass world, it's growing like crazy with these high school clubs. I'm even seeing some saltwater fishing clubs happening in high school and junior highs. That stuff gives me a lot of hope, and it's really, really exciting. There's also a ton of women who are now fishing. That is awesome. I mean, that is huge. And honestly, probably the biggest opportunity is women and kids and fishing. I mean, that's a massive, massive opportunity. So the more that we can make fishing fun and easy and accessible for women and kids and just anyone in general who has not been fishing ever, or maybe it's been years or since they were a kid, the better we're all going to be. And then once again, that's another reason that, we're so big on education and many times just putting the simple stuff out, like tying knots and how to go, catch a bunch of, snapper underneath a bridge, just the simple stuff that some of the advanced anglers might take for granted or say, oh man, that's just for beginners. If we don't have the beginners, we're never going to have more advanced people, right? I mean, that's been part of the problem with fishing. It's, we've got a lot of older people who are now either passing away or getting too old to fish, and obviously don't even have to pay for a license once you hit a certain age. And all that stuff impacts the amount of power and amount of money and the amount of resources that we have is anglers. So it is critical that we're getting kind of new blood, the same way that a church grows or any organization grows. You have to have some younger people that you're grooming to take the spot of the next generation. So I think as anglers, that's going to be on us to one, to make it fun, and two, to make it accessible and to be open and to be loving and not belittling, newbies or people that have maybe never fished before. That part just absolutely kills me. And that's what I love about our insider community. If you're in there, you already know this. I mean, we don't allow cursing. There's no negativity. There's no bad questions. We've actually kicked people out and just given their money back who have been jerks. Just don't have time for it. And it honestly, it hurts the fishing community as a whole if a new person can't ask a legitimate question and get a legitimate answer back. I think it's on us as anglers to remember that we were all new at one point as well, and that there was usually someone that helped us out. It might have been a neighbor or parent or grandparent that taught us how to tie knots, that taught us the difference between a bait caster and a spinning gear, that taught us the difference between inshore saltwater fishing and offshore. I mean, a lot of people don't even know those simple terms, and we shouldn't make fun of that because we were all there at one point. We all had to learn it. So I would encourage you, anytime that you have the chance, to either take someone out new or even just online, especially like in our insider community, of just helping someone else learn and to create an experience and a memory out there. Gosh, take it. There is just nothing more rewarding, and you never know that person might turn into the next Johnny Morris, right, or the next Joe and Luke Simons, running a group like Salt Strong, or the next Bill Dance, or whoever it might be. you just never know what might happen. So I would highly encourage you to spread the love, if you will, when it comes to fishing any way you can. I think the kind of conclusion here is that the tackle side of things is coming back to more of a normal, let's just say 2019 type of a level. It's still growing, which is great. I do get a little bit worried that there is going to be just a little bit too much, or maybe even a lot too much in some certain areas of inventory out there that is going to kind of stifle some of maybe the innovation from groups, right? If you're sitting on inventory, either as a manufacturer or even a tackle store owner, it kind of stresses you out and you stop innovating. And you just like, I just got to sell this stuff so we, have enough cash to keep growing. That's my only worry about where we are with the tackle side of things. Good news is for, consumers, there should be some better deals for you on everything from boats and kayaks and skiffs to tackle. So that's the good news. And then this whole conservation and access, I do believe that's going to be just so critical to the future of where this goes and what does saltwater fishing and freshwater fishing, for that matter, look like in 10 or 15 years from now. I think so many of us look at things in really, really short spans, like, oh, what's this going to do for fishing tomorrow or next week when I have the day off? But we really need to look at a longer form horizon. And anytime that you see anything with access, get involved. Anything you see anything with water in particular in your area, get involved. I thought it was the coolest thing ever with this Cape Cod deal. Our friend Ryan up there in My Fishing Cape Cod, I mean, we're talking about 1 million gallons of, potentially toxic waste was going to get just dumped, flushed right into Cape Cod. And they put a little, essentially a petition together. We got involved very early on, and that thing got legs, and the news picked it up. And all of a sudden, they were like 300,000 people had voted for this, to not do this in this one little area of Cape Cod. And I believe, as I'm recording this, it's kind of put a stop to it, at least temporarily. Where now they're really investigating this and looking into it. Otherwise, once again, had we not had the people who have cared, they would have just dumped it. It was already happening. It was approved. I'm guessing whatever politician said, oh, yeah, this is a massive company and it's a lot of jobs, a lot of votes. So, yeah, let's just go ahead and dump it. Who cares? Hopefully it won't kill as many fish as we think. And that's kind of, I'm guessing that's the conversations behind the scenes. They know it's not good. How can dumping 1 million gallons of toxic waste be good for any body of water? But sadly, that's the kind of stuff that's happened behind the scenes and really just behind our backs for so long. And it's so cool that we now have a voice and we have the internet to use our voice and our numbers to actually, put some stops to some of this stuff. So continue to do that. And then the local love part, as I said, and just the communities, get involved, come to one of our chapter meetings. We're starting these here in April. Got our first 5 are going to be kicking off in April. And all that can be found at community.saltstrong.com, community.saltstrong.com. That is our private community for Insider members only, where we have 36,000 members now and growing by like 70 to 100 a day now, if you guys can believe it. And so that part really excites me, because I remember the days where we were happy to get 10 new members in a day. Now we're getting 75 to 100 new members a day are joining Salt Strong Insider Club. So if you are a member, thank you so much. You are the foundation of this. If you're not, come join us today. We would love to have you in there. And if you have any questions or thoughts, I'm sure I missed some stuff, but these are just kind of the ideas on the top of my head. I'm just going off of my head and all the things that I've been thinking about and hearing about really over the last few months. And I do believe all 3 of these things I discussed we'll continually talk about on this podcast and some of our emails and videos over the next year. So hit me up, guys. I appreciate you big time. Leave a comment down below, and then we'll talk to you on the next episode.
'Cause fishing, it's in my soul.